Got word at our campus that we needed to shift from in class to online. You can imagine it was a mad scramble. And one of my first thought was, okay, I do a lot of experiential stuff. What am I going to do, particularly with regard to using the IES in the classroom? There's so much that I do in class. How can I take that online? And so I began to look at some of the possibilities, and I was really excited as we moved along. So here are some of my suggestions for how you can use the intercultural effectiveness scale in a virtual classroom and why it might even be more effective in that sort of setting. To begin with, I looked at how I normally taught the IES, and so let me briefly describe that. Generally, I have students complete the IES in advance of class, and I don't release their reports. I keep their reports and have them prepared for delivery in the class session. I think that's important because I want to make sure that the survey is properly framed and that they're ready to receive that information. And then in the class, I'll generally introduce the different dimensions and factors of the IES. We'll talk about them. And I will ask the students to do a self-assessment. That is, as we go through and talk about each factor, for example, continuous learning, I'll ask them to reflect on that concept as they've understood it during the brief time that we spent talking about it, and then to evaluate themselves. In fact, I hand out a little sheet that allows them to kind of do a self-scoring. Once they've done that, I feel like they have an understanding of the different concepts and dimensions. Then I will share with them their results. In class, I usually hand out printed copies, but I've also on occasion simply released those reports. I take a short break, hit the send button on the website, and off go the reports, and then students open them. And we go over them in class. And then I have a number of activities I do with them following up on that, on how to interpret their results, what to do in terms of moving forward with this new information they have about themselves. So moving to an online setting, I thought, okay, how can I do that? And the first thought was, well, I don't need to worry about releasing the reports. I can do that just as I would normally do. And when it comes to introducing the concepts, I'll do a brief lecturette, as I call them, a mini lecture, and talk about what these different dimensions are. And then I can also have them do the scoring at home. The real challenge comes to how do we interpret this together, and what do we do as a class, and how can I make that meaningful? So what I did with my online delivery is went ahead and did the lecture. They completed the IES in advance, and actually it was easier to release the reports once we were at that point in the session. And the students of course pulled them up on their screens. They started to look through them, and then I used we operate primarily in Zoom. Then I used the breakout feature. And I put the students into groups, and I asked them to discuss with other members in their breakout rooms. Now, the students had previously been organized into groups, and so I put them into those groups already established because I knew they had a working relationship. And then remaining in breakout groups, I gave them a number of questions to address. What scores surprised you? What results surprised you? What do you feel is something you might work on? How might you work on that? I asked them to discuss that in their breakout groups, and then we after giving them about 10 minutes to do that. Then we came back in plenary, the whole class, and we had a discussion much like we would have in class. But from there, I took another step, and I gave them an offline assignment, which was to pair up with somebody in their group. These were in groups of 4, so essentially 2 pairs per group, to pair up with somebody in their group and to do a coaching session with one another. That is, out away from class, offline, hop on the phone or hop on Zoom or even via email. Share your individual results with that person, and then talk about how you've made sense of them, and ask the other person for their input, their observations. Since these individuals had worked in groups previously, had some experience with one another, they were also in a position to have observed this other individual and offer some comment. I then, again offline, asked them to share their information within the group. So now the two pairs that had worked in pairs were back together as a group, and they shared that information more broadly. And then I took it one step further and had them work on discussion boards, sharing their thoughts for which particular dimension they wanted to work on in the IES and what specific steps they would take, essentially building out from the personal development plan guides in the IES report. I was fascinated when I took a look at those discussion boards at how rich the comments were, and how much more interaction there was than typically I would observe doing this in a single class session. It seemed that moving offline and working virtually allowed the students to open up and share things in a way that, given the nature of a class session, they might not normally do. Consequently, I came away extremely excited about the prospects for using the IES in a virtual setting, in an online class. I would encourage you to consider what things you can do to use the IES and make it more effective in your work with your students.